right. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Drawing Down the Dragon. I'm Snappy, and today I'm joined by Blitz from At Stone Bible Studies. How's it going, Blitz?
I'm good. How are you?
Really happy and having a great day and excited to be here with you. This is going to be a really
Yeah, me too.
really fun interview. So we actually met through the Lady Babylon community, and I've been diving deep into your channel here, Stone Bible Studies. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and the work you're doing on your channel to begin with?
Okay, for a living, I work on airplanes, so nothing to do with the Bible at all or anything like that. But I grew up going to church, and my mind has changed many times over the years. I have evolved, and so. To be honest, one of the things that caused me to really, really do a deep dive is what's going on in the Middle East right now. I wanted to, okay, what does it really mean? What does the Bible really say? And then I would advise being careful about doing a deep dive on the Bible because it might cause you to question your faith. Because there's a lot of things in there that my pastor didn't tell me about, as they say. So
Right.
anyway, so then so my first video was about the word cannabosum, which
Okay.
is used as one of the ingredients in the holy anointing oil. Okay, and I remember going to a church. I was getting pretty involved. I was even playing bass in the church band and everything. And then they told me that, well, weed is the devil. And I was like, no, it's not. you know? So then I found out about this lady named Sula Bennett who kind of tried to etymologically link the word cannabosum to the word cannabis in the Greek. So her hypothesis, it's a much older word, and the Scythians get their word for cannabis from etc. Right? So and then in I think it's 2020, they actually proved that there was resin found on an altar, a Judaite altar. So I'm like, oh, there you go. That's Sula Bennett would have been, happy to hear this news. I think, right?
Actually heard Sula Bennett from a cool a person I actually got to meet because I was like you interested in a lot of this cannabis stuff. Have you ever heard of the scholar Chris Bennett, Canadian scholar?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
I've heard
yeah,
of them. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Libra 420. That's how I first discovered about some of this stuff.
Oh,
It's a
nice.
really great book. Yeah.
I heard about him because of her, like, because apparently he draws a lot of inspiration from her. So
Well,
this
yeah,
is
he
kind of
cites
cool.
her like
Yeah.
a couple hundred times. I actually got to interview him on this channel
Oh, cool.
once, and he actually sent me a signed copy of his book because I
Oh,
wound
wow.
up winning a
Nice.
trivia competition he had on his Facebook page. But yeah,
Oh, cool.
really interesting dude. But there's so much to this cannabis stuff, though. Like when you start to get into that holy of holies, and you start to look into the Judaic rituals, like to me, right? Like my main background is more involved in the Greek stuff. And we see a lot of this kind of similar magic where they're using, like in the Greek theater, there's a lot of speculation that they were imbibing cannabis. They certainly were imbibing wine because they used to have this magical ritual where they'd enter into a tent called the Skene, and then they come out as a new character, donning a mask. And they said they would come out in clouds of smoke. And we know
Yeah.
the Dionysus is it's associated with all of this kind of
I
plant
call it
magic,
hot boxing. I call it hot boxing in the name of the Lord, right?
right? Right. Well, and like
That's what
there's
they were
another
doing.
oh yeah, another really cool
Like,
scholar I become friends with, and you can talk to him on the discords is Wretch, and you should check out his book because Wretch does this whole. He has this amazing book called it's like pagan and Gnostic antecedents to the Kabbalah, and he goes through all of these wild pagan references, and he shows like these magi who are digging holes and then using their magic carpets to cover the hole, and then you're hotboxing in this cave,
oh,
right? Or they're using
hence the
their
magic carpet, eh?
right
You go for a
or they're
trip, eh?
exactly,
Go for a little
exactly.
trip.
Or another wild
That's
one is
cool.
they take their cylindrical hats, right? Their wizard caps with the stars, and they
Okay.
take cloaks with the stars, and they would create a hot box. But you also have a visual representation of the sky now. So you can make all of these alchemical connections in your mind if you're doing this kind of imagination work, right?
Yeah.
So we see
That's
all this
cool. Yeah.
kind of. we see all this kind
Yeah,
of cannabis magic in the area. So it's
yeah.
certainly there in the Hebrew, you know?
Yeah, I kind of like I kind of tried to make my channel at first like based on like every drug there is in the Bible, which
Mm.
there's quite a few of them actually. Like, but I kind of ran out of that fairly quickly, so then I started doing all. I expanded. Like I said, I did that hypothesis about the Garden of Eden, drawing from the
Talk, talk
Gilgamesh.
to talk to our audience about this because this was a really cool idea and something I think that may have some kind of merit, honestly.
Yeah, so I think a lot of scholars would agree that the Bible has Mesopotamian roots coming from the story of Gilgamesh. They
Yep.
had the flood story, which is almost the same, other than just a few names are changed, right? And so then there's a story in Gilgamesh about how they cut down the cedars of Lebanon with their knowledge of metallurgy. And so then I sort of drew the connection to like the Garden of Eden, and the knowledge was maybe our knowledge and ability to cut down the trees and basically destroy the Garden of Eden, right? And I think there's some merit to the idea, but I also think what's sad about it is I always say the only thing we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. So here we are thousands of years later doing the same thing, cutting the Amazon rainforest down, haven't learned a thing, you know?
Yeah, and we're destroying all those things, you know, and there's so many more, like when you're dealing with a grove or a forest, that's an entire ecosystem. Who knows what we lost besides the trees, you know?
Yeah, and that was my idea. That was actually talking. That was the Garden of Eden, and we destroyed it because, and the Bible talks a lot about the cedars of Lebanon. So, and they
Absolutely.
even, like I was saying to you earlier, they still call it the cedars of God. So, you
They
know,
do. They do. And
yeah,
it's still a sacred thing, you know? And to me,
yeah,
this also connects to some ideas about Yahweh himself. So I've read several things over the years that connect Yahweh to sort of these volcanic Vulcan type gods, war gods associated with fire and metallurgy. So another similar god in the Greek would be Hephaestus, right? And if this is true, if he's this metallurgical god, the war god, he's destroying the feminine, destroying the trees to empower his technology. Seems kind of
yeah,
wild. Yeah.
yeah, and we were warned about it, like I say, thousands of years ago, and we didn't listen, and we're still doing it. We haven't changed, right?
No, we haven't
Sadly,
changed. We haven't changed at all.
no.
You know, I really do love your channel though, because you do these kind of these really cool breakdowns where you're talking about these ideas and you reference a bunch of scholars, but you have a real lighthearted kind of humor to it that's really fun. So, like the video I was really enjoying that you were going into was all about the Asherah poles and the goddess Asherah. So, what's your perspective on Yahweh and Asherah?
Well, so the way I kind of see it is that the Abrahamic religions kind of like demonize the divine feminine, right? And Asherah, they tore down the Asherah poles to centralize power in Judea or whatever, right? And that was
Mhm.
like it was like a, how do you say, establishing the patriarchy, like, right? But
Right.
like if you go back far enough, like Gaia was the god that we venerated, right? And
Right. Right.
right. So, and then, so the divine feminine is what we used to worship. And the way I look at it is if we still did that, would we be clear cutting her forests? Would we be bombing her land? No, because if we loved her, we wouldn't be destroying her. So it's
Right.
almost like, it's like the money, desire for money is maybe what drove the patriarchy, because it's like more about cut those, forests down and, you know, so
Yeah.
one thing I learned recently is that like so writing was literally invented to track wealth. That's what it was invented
Yeah.
to do, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so like when people talk about like what a non-capitalist system looks like we really don't know, because writing sort of came after capitalism, right? That's why we invented it, to track our capitals.
Oh,
So
oh man, yeah, that's a good point. That's so
yeah,
interesting. You know, and there's a lot to this too, because like, okay, so my background is in religion studies and anthropology, and I remember at one, studying a lot about indigenous cultures in the Americas. And one of the big things, a lot of There's still indigenous cultures to this day that have zero converts to Christianity, that they've never bothered to be manipulated in. And there's a lot of speculation that most of this has to do with language in the way that these different communities perceive reality, and their emphasis upon reason, and their emphasis upon not resorting to a lot of wild abstract thought. And you can see this in the linguistics of a lot of these, especially South American languages, where in order to describe something, you have to use all these different verbs. So you have to say, like, so you can't just say where you got the information from. You have to say, did you see it? Did someone tell you? There's all of these different things. So when these missionaries were going to these indigenous peoples and they're trying to talk about Christ, they're like, well, did you meet him? Like, no. Well, then did someone you know meet him? They're like, no. So you don't even know who this person was? When were they alive? Thousands of years ago. And they're like, why are you telling me about this person? They're dead. They don't matter. Like this, it just meant no sense to these people. And it's largely, and also these people largely don't have concepts of God. They have concepts of spirits, but the spirits are more animals and of the nature and more what we would perceive. And when I first started reading this, it almost seems like these people were almost atheistic or agnostic, but they certainly were
Yeah.
not caught up in this kind of abstract magical thinking that we see at the heart of religion, you know?
Yeah, well, I definitely think like modern, like the patriarchy, the Abrahamic religions, the purpose was to get people to obey. Like that is the purpose, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
to be fair, there is some value in getting people to obey a standard or obey a set of rules because, I like to say if we were all benevolent geniuses, we wouldn't need rules.
Right. Right.
But unfortunately, we are not, right? So we need rules, to be fair. And what higher authority to appeal to than God, right?
Right.
But then, of course, it gets abused, right? Because power, ultimate power, ultimately always gets abused, right? Or what is it? How does the
Well, it's also,
Machiavellian say it?
and that whole thing of God, though, is just so ridiculous in many ways, because as soon as you create an absolute, how can you speak for the absolute? How can you know what the absolute has to say? How can you gender the absolute? Right? And it becomes so abstract and removed. Now you have to create a whole mythos in order to be able to comprehend the absolute. And then you
Right.
want
But
to
I mean,
create even hierarchies of
it was like you
laws.
had to go through them to get to God, right? Like that was sort of
Exactly.
the point. To
That
get
is the
access to God, you have to go through us. It's like a monopoly on God. It's like kind of crazy,
absolute,
right? Like
absolute.
Like my favorite verse of the Bible or part of the Bible in the gospel is when the curtain rips, and that symbolizes that we no longer have to go to the temple to see God. Like whatever you
Wow.
think of the religion, that definitely sort of questioned the power of the temple or the monopoly, right? Which
Absolutely.
it's kind of political in a way, right?
Oh,
And
for sure.
it's
And
powerful too, right?
there's clearly a political angle to all of this, right? With all of this kind of
Oh yeah,
religion from the get-go. And
for
Jesus is a
sure.
reformer, and he rejects, he refines the old law and turns it into something new. Well, I mean, at least his mythopoetic character, does that through story and through cultural manipulation. But it is born of real, it is born of a real frustration with a system that was oppressing people, and
Hmm.
like I think a lot of this stuff, like something like Christianity, you don't take over the world unless you have something real to offer people, right? Now, you don't offer them too much of any good thing. There's always a lot of bad, but there is real morality, there is real magic in the Bible. Otherwise, people
Yeah,
wouldn't
for
obsess
sure.
over it.
Yeah. Yeah, it would speak to people, and it does even to me certain things like the kingdom of heaven is within you, which to me just means if you're looking for happiness out there, you're not going to find it. You got to look in here to find it, and that's like a bit of a metaphor, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the greatest, as a Hellenic pagan, something I take very, very seriously is the virtue of hospitality. This is like the central virtue in the Hellenic tradition. But you see this within the Christian tradition too. They take it almost verbatim, right? You have to love your neighbor as you would love yourself, right? You have to care about the stranger, welcome in the immigrant, welcome in the foreigner. you know? And this all stuff is so primordial and human, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have a proclivity to believe in something higher than ourselves.
Mhm.
And so then the powers that be took advantage of that proclivity and used it to their benefit, I think, is what happened, you know? Because,
Yeah.
like, to
Oh,
me, like, when you
yeah.
start digging into the Bible, you realize it's pretty much just ancient propaganda, is what it is. Like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, like,
This takes me to another interesting thing. So you have this really cool video on the Hyksos and the Hyksos rebellion.
yeah,
And this gets
yeah,
into a lot of the wild political origins of the Bible. So I wanted to ask you your thoughts. So when I was in religion studies, one of the more standard historical analyses that you see now in modern religion studies is this idea that, modern Israeli religion was created after the fall of Babylon by Persia to create a buffer state that was anti-Egyptian to protect the Persian Empire from Egypt. And it was empowering the Hyksos, who had been cast out for being monotheists and having followed Akhenaten. And then they empowered them in Israel and reshaped. If we look at the Talmud, right? We have the Babylonian Talmud, and then we have the earlier Talmud. And the Babylonian Talmud is where we start to get all this Zoroastrianism, we get all this anti-Egyptian stuff. The Genesis story doesn't appear anywhere until this period. So it seems to me there's a real strong political manipulation at play from the Persian Empire
by the
in order,
Persians, yeah.
right, in order to create an antagonism.
That
What's
makes
your thought?
sense because, yeah, that makes sense. I never thought of that, but you know, it does make sense because it was the Persians that like captured the elites and brought them to
Yes,
Babylon, and that's where a lot of the Bible was written, right? And
exactly.
so, you
And it
know,
seems written
oh
as like
yeah,
this anti-Egyptian nationalism. And look, they even make the Persian king a messiah in the Bible, you know? So it gets so weird.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of yeah. I mean, so this is what I kind of drew conclusion of this to really understand the Bible. You have to look at what's going on I know everywhere else too. Like look at all their literature and see what it's saying, because like I'm a believer that like there's three stories, mine, yours, and the truth, right? Or
Absolutely.
so you've got to see many angles to really get to the truth. So it is interesting when you start digging into some other sources in the area, then you can start to see what where the Bible's coming from, kind of like to a degree.
Right.
I mean, I might be extrapolating a lot, but so like because what's it called, the Ugaritic texts
Hmm.
shine a lot of light on sort of the early like Genesis, Exodus, and stuff, like the names of the gods and the pantheon, and you can really see the polytheistic roots of the Bible once you realize what they're talking about, right? And yeah, so big time, like, right, like in so many things, like if you start digging into it, it's just like wow, like it's wild. And I
Well,
and I
you clearly see an evolution across the Bible, right? Like in the earliest
yeah,
Bible, there's a clear understanding that there's Elohim, that Yah is the chosen God of Israel, and there are other gods that we have to go and fight against.
yeah,
That's
he's
like clear verbatim,
one of the sons
right?
of El, right? Yahweh was one of the sons
Exactly.
of El, one of the 70 sons, right? And he is, yeah, so there you go. Yeah. Or even
And
in the beginning, it says, God, let us create man in our image, plural, right? So he's
right.
not, he's talking to a pantheon of gods. But then the Christian apologists will say, oh, he's talking to Jesus. That's what the
Yeah, or
Christian.
they do things like the royal we, how like the queen refers to herself in that. So God refers to himself as Elohim because they're a multiplicity. It's like fuck off, Like I don't believe that for
Yeah.
1 second.
Uh,
That's such an
you can convince
extrapolation.
yourself of anything if you want to, right? Like,
Right,
it's
right.
like what,
But this is what I mean. Like there's like once we accept this kind of idea of historical evolution and political power at play, you can clearly see the Bible as an evolutionary text that takes on
yeah,
several different incarnations across history, you know?
yeah,
Um, and I just can't look at it throughout, it's so important for us to take these kind of political, economic considerations under consideration. Like I think a really I think Christianity largely exists in the way it does because the Roman Empire took one look at the temple in Jerusalem and was like, they're making billions. And also, they have an ideology that allows them to attack and steal from the unbeliever. If we could take that and apply it to our political universalism, we could dominate the world. And what the hell happened? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, see, I don't know, because I like pondered that question a lot. Like, did
Mm.
why did of Christianity? Was it just because it was so powerful he had no choice? Like it
Mm.
was, and why did it get so big so fast? You know, what is it about it that I don't, you know, I ponder that question a lot, and I still haven't really still haven't got to the answer on that one. Like
You
from,
know,
you know, but
the biggest thing that I've read from
and probably
scholars
never.
about Christianity that seems to be the reason why it becomes favored, right? Like, for example, if we take a look at Constantine, I mean, part of the reason is because his mother, we can't deny that. But we also have to look at the political reality at the time. There were thousands of these roving Christian mercenary bands that were going around and raiding pagans, and they were fighting with the Mithraists. And what do we see Constantine doing? If we're being really honest with ourselves, he creates an amount. He doesn't just adopt Christianity; he merges Christianity with Mithraism and the cult of Cybele, which the Magna Mater, which was the previous Roman cult of the emperors. Like Emperor Julian the Apostate tries to reassert the cult of Cybele and fails to do so after he dies in a war. But we clearly see this kind of, like, at that time, there seems to be three major religions that are fighting and vying. Well, four if you count Yahwism, but four major religions that are fighting for the Mediterranean soul: Christianity, Mithraism, goddess worship in the form of like Cybele, Isis, and, you know, which are somewhat connected and somewhat distinct, but you see this throughout the magical rites. And then, of course, you have, you know, the Yahists, the people who are following, and they're, you know, you really see all the syncretism in the magical texts, because this is where, if you go to like the PGM, the Greek magical papyri, you'll have Egyptian magic combined with Mithraic magic, combined with Christian, combined with Greek, combined with the goddess stuff, all
Oh yeah.
forming
Well,
into one weird amalgam, you know? And it seems like all of these different cults are vying for control. Like if we look at, for example, the most famous Roman novel of all time, it's basically a propaganda piece for the Great Mother cult. You know, Apuleius is the Golden Ass, is all about him realizing the universal nature of the mother and joining her community and to achieve enlightenment. You
what
know, and
year?
this,
What year was
sorry,
that?
good question. Let me just double check.
What year was that written?
I'm just gonna check here. So the gold. All right, so it is seen to have been okay. What is it seen? So it is in the late second century. The late second century is when it's fine. But there are earlier
80?
versions of this text, AD. So the problem though is that this is a much earlier story that we don't have the earliest Greek translations of. We have one from about, you know, contemporary by Lucian, who was a Greek scholar and a philosopher who I'm sure you're familiar with him. He was so important in all the writings. Um, and
Lucian, yeah, a little bit, a little bit. I haven't dug into the Greek that much because,
mm,
like, I have focused solely on the Bible, I guess,
right,
and then and then that's a when you say the Bible, like, what do you mean? Because that can mean like,
right.
because does that mean the King James? Does it mean the Septuagint? Does it mean the Masoretic? It could mean a lot of things.
Right.
Like when you say the Bible, what does the Bible say, right? So
That's a
and
good point.
you know, it's like I started learning a bit of the Greek, but that's a massive subject. Yeah, but
Oh yeah, for
he
sure.
has so
Just
much
as the
time.
Bible is
But
a massive, you
yeah,
know, it's one of these things where, like, for me, my interest has always been in mythology in general. So I was just so enamored, and I read all this, and then I've been able to apply it to Christianity and to see the parallels. And it's just really interesting to see all
thing
of
I
these.
find
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say one thing I find interesting about when you start digging into the literature you just on Christianity is how much there is than what they told us about, right? Like there's this huge catalog of like how you say Gnostic texts and things, and like
Hmm.
probably many more were burnt that we never to read, right? So
Oh yeah.
Christianity was much more diverse, like at first, like within the first century, what Christianity looked like could have been a lot of different things, right?
Oh,
Which is one
absolutely.
thing I found fairly fascinating. Yeah. So then
Oh, it's almost
that's
certainly
what
we have
Constantine
like.
supposedly did is like
Sorry,
he
yeah, go
sat
ahead.
them down and said, okay, decide what it is, right? Oh, I was just going to say that was what Constantine did. He's like, okay, sit down and decide what this is so that we can sell it to the people, I guess, right? Like, you need to decide on the same story here, guys, like, right?
You have to create
And then,
a
yeah, but I
coherent
mean,
theology, right?
yeah, yeah, so that you could run an empire with it, because that's the whole point. But have you ever heard the theory that I think it's Russell Gamerkin talks about his
Yeah.
theory that is like was somehow the Septuagint and the New Testament was influenced by Plato to try and write a like foundation story. To build a kingdom, you need a foundation story, right? So it was like a fabricated, foundation story so that, and look, yeah, we're still 2000 years later, here we are, right?
Well, I
So,
mean, this is basically what I believe, regardless of the true history of it. If you were to dive into Plato, Plato is Christianity. He is Christian morality. He wants a philosopher king. He
yeah,
wants a one universal globalized society. He wants a one universal language and everyone under a one universal symbol set, and he popularizes a lot of this patriarchy, a lot of this kind of, basically this idea too of the noble lie is so essential because the basic idea, right? Like if we're trying to understand Plato, you have to see him in the context of the pre-Socratics and the breaking down of meaning. So what you see, where Plato comes out of is you got this guy Heraclitus who says that basically only thing that is real is change, all is flux, and this breaks the whole Greek philosophical system. From Heraclitus, you get Socrates, and Socrates is basically the ultimate troll. His whole thing is knowledge is impossible, the universe is absurd, and I'm going to just throw it in your face. And Plato comes out as a reaction to all of this absurdity. So if we're dealing with a universe that we can't understand, that we can't know, and that there is no absolute moral framework, what do we do in the face of the absurdity? Plato says we construct the one world government. We construct our own myth. We construct our own version of reality. I know what's right, and I can apply that as a universal to everyone. And this is what we should do. And we can convince everyone to share this view set, and we can face the absurd with a shared, empowered perspective. Now, by the time you get to the Roman Empire, they're taking this idea and they're utilizing it in a very nefarious way. They even take it farther than Plato ever wanted to. I think it's just like in my mind, it's
so
just
you,
that's what
so
happened.
you're saying Plato had good intentions. Are you saying basically like
Well,
his intention
all
was
these
to build a
people,
cohesive society with a
oh yeah, I think all these people ultimately have good intentions, but they're all bound up in their limited individual moral systems. They're all caught up in their own perspective, you know? Right? Like, I don't think Plato necessarily wanted what was worst for humanity, but he helped bring about a patriarchal system based on a lie, in order to bind people to a shared
yeah.
perspective, right?
But then it was for sure Constantine that did have nefarious reasons.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I
Oh,
mean, if
yeah.
you
This
want
is
to
the
be
thing.
emperor, that's nefarious
Oh,
right
yeah.
there.
Oh,
Just that
yeah. Totally
desire to
different.
rule. I think
Yeah.
there's
I
like
mean,
what it was Plato I think that said. Sorry, I was going to
go
say
ahead.
it was Plato I think that said fit to rule are those that do not seek it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you make a very good
Whereas,
point.
yeah.
Constantine is
So like Constantine, I
clearly,
think, yeah. And
he's
here,
the
that's where I
Machiavellian
always
guy.
used to believe it's
Sorry.
where it all got messed up. That's what I used to think. I used to think that's where it all got messed up. Maybe it was good, and then constantly came along, adopted it for, political reasons, for power reasons, and that's where it all got messed up. But it's so long ago, and it's like
Well, you know,
we don't
I think it
have.
was messed up
There's
from the
so
get-go, to be honest. I think
yeah,
Plato
maybe
made it worse, but I see a lot of it
yeah.
as
Like I,
just go ahead, sorry. The delay's
well, I
getting
was
really
gonna
bad.
say, like, do you think he was a real guy though? Like, is the question, because I think there was a real guy that the
Mm,
myth is based on, kind of a little like Santa Claus, or like how Saint Nicholas was a real guy
mm,
to give gifts on Christmas, and then he became morphed into this amalgamation of different myths. And next thing you know, he's got flying reindeer and what, right? So obviously that didn't happen. And I see that Jesus maybe is the same thing, right? Like he was probably a real guy that got some attention, got crucified for it because you don't stand in the way of Rome, and then all these myths got put onto him, much in the way that and then but like for political reasons, like I mean, who wrote Mark, I think he had an agenda.
right.
So, but
I
who
mean, we
knows?
see many different types of
But
these
still,
characters, right? Like even before Jesus, you got John the Baptist, right? And there's clearly,
yeah,
one of the things we got to talk about is like part of the reason why there's all this insanity going on in the Bible and there's all this religious wildness happening is because of the insanity of the state. It was an extreme patriarchal oppressive state. It didn't allow someone like Jesus, if he existed, wouldn't have been considered a citizen, wouldn't have had rights. He was a bastard. He would have been considered a dog, cast out to the margins of society, you know? And there was a massive underclass. We're talking millions of people in this underclass that were serving this empowered religious authority system. And there were millions of people coming all around from the Mediterranean to prop up that system with money in order to gain the favor of God. So it's like this is a situation that's just it's ripe for revolution. It's ripe for overthrowing. Do I think there was a literal Jesus? Maybe. I think there were certainly many activists, and there were probably many Jesuses,
yeah, for
is
sure.
my belief. Just
Like
like
you
we
said,
got
like
John the Baptist.
John, yeah, John the Baptist. So the way predates Jesus by like 150 years. Like
Yep,
they call it the way, right? And it was, and you know how it says in Mark, they were preparing the way for Jesus in the desert. Well, that's where Qumran was, and that's where they were writing all these texts, and they did call themselves the way. So there's a connection there, right? So I think
yep,
that got pinned on one guy, that he might not even been one of the what were they called in the desert? I forget. The
the Essenes.
Nagamati, or I forget.
Yeah, the
The
Essenes.
Essenes, that's it. That's the one. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So they wrote about the way, right? But I mean, a lot of people say the way a lot of things Jesus said didn't really jive with what they were doing. But there's a connection there, I think, for sure, right?
Oh,
So it's like
absolutely.
something, yeah, movement that started 150 years before he was supposedly even crucified, right? So it's like, and it was a how you say apocalyptic. It was an apocalyptic cult, right? They believed
Yep.
that God saved them from the Romans, I guess, or something, right?
Well,
Which
you know what the other thing
you
though is
know,
that we have to talk about is these Bacchic cults that are running around in the Greek era that they're always yelling about. I look at someone like John the Baptist, a man with wild hair and a big beard who lives in the woods, calling people back to a natural way of life, calling people back to a more pure place, who's waiting for the child to come. This is the key thing. So if you get deep into the Bacchic mysteries, right, the Eleusinian mysteries, and most people will never get this deep because you don't get there without the Greek and without serious uncovering. But the whole nature of the Bacchic rites is about the birth of what's
a
called the
serious
child to
study.
come. Is about the child to come. It's this virgin birth. It's literally right at the heart of the mystery. Dionysus is the dying and rising god who will be reborn again as the child to come. Plutus. Sometimes he's called Harpocrates, Harpocrat, or he's called Iacchus. But The idea of a wild man in the woods waiting for God to be born with a coming star, this is Greek magic, man, and this is all over the Mediterranean, but we've
Yeah.
whitewashed this shit and pretend that it never existed, you know?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Have you video on? I was trying to draw a comparison to the dying and rising, and it was my Easter episode, like Jesus died
Mm,
and rose. But I was drawing a comparison to Baal because of the cycle, right? Do you
right.
know the Baal cycle? Yeah, it's like he's the dying and rising God. He's kind of the original dying and rising God, like
Oh, yeah,
theoretically. I don't know, but they write about him in the Ur text, right? So, but it's like
absolutely.
goes with nature, though. That's what the done, right? Yeah, obviously, yeah, everything to do with nature, like the yeah, totally.
There's this
So
whole thing
yeah,
with the
I mean,
like it also
and
connects us to the Demeter cult, like you were talking about Gaia and the Mother Earth, right? The secret of the Bacchic mystery is the earth giving birth to life. So in some ways, this is a virgin birth because it's the idea that, you see this described in the Bacchic mysteries as the shoots of grass coming up from the underworld. And Dionysus is born when the sun goes under the earth. And when you bring the light into the underground when he dies, then you can cause the life to come. So it's really an agricultural myth that takes on this
yeah,
human
same, yeah,
layer,
same, yeah,
right? For people to understand. And we see this throughout. Like
yeah,
you got
yeah,
Adonis, we got all kinds of different comparable dying and rising gods all across these traditions, you know? And Bacchus
yeah.
in
But
the Bacchic
that's when
rites.
we
Yeah, sorry. One of the things
I
you would
think
do
we
though,
depended on.
go ahead. Sorry,
I
we'll
was gonna
just
say I
say
think we depended on the. Yeah, there's a delay. I think we like back then we worshiped nature because we had to, right? And so that whole
mm,
dying and rising cycle was it was important, integral to our survival,
absolutely.
right? And that's why like summer and winter solstices were so important because this is the longest night of the year. It's going to be cold. We're going to have to like butcher the animals and like get ready for winter and have a big feast and and so around the world, you see cultures like venerating like the summer and winter solstice that aren't even connected,
Yep,
and it's like very
absolutely.
you see it in almost every culture, right? But
Right. Well, this is
it's
the
like
wild
seems
thing
like a
too.
natural.
It's totally a natural thing. And like we can see that the Christians supplant the natural religion. Like for example, this is clear when
Yeah,
you get into the Roman studies. The festival of the birth of the child to come, Dionysus reborn, happened in the Roman classical calendar on the 25th. They'll tell you it didn't, but it clearly did. We can go back, and when you do all of the lining up, on the 25th is when the child to come is born. That's when the sun dies and is reborn. This is happening right
yeah,
at the tail end of the Saturnalia,
of
you know?
course. It's winter solstice. We've been
Right?
we've been celebrating like as humans have been celebrating winter solstice for probably no, like, we don't even know how long. I seen a
Absolutely.
place in Ireland. It was 5,000-year-old passage tomb designed to capture the winter solstice, and it would light the passage tomb up. So this is 5,000 years ago. We've been like worshiping the cycles, right? So
Right.
like so this idea that it just happens that Jesus was right around winter solstice. That's and they have this whole calculation theory and stuff. It's like, oh my lord, like you can really do some mental gymnastics to convince yourself of anything, I guess.
And it
But
gets so wild too when you get into these Greek and Roman calendars. They can accurately predict both of the dates for Jesus's birth because Cybele was sorry, Dionysus was born on the 25th in Rome, and in ancient Greece, he was born on the 8th or 6th of January. So it's like it's clear they just usurped, they just literally took the previous rites
yeah,
and stuck Jesus on top, just quite literally, you
yeah.
know?
Oh, the Romans did that for sure. The Romans did that for sure, no doubt about
Yeah.
it. And there's a lot of like Egypt stuff in like the Catholic Church. Like you can see like a lot of the things with the hats and stuff, it all comes from Egyptian, right? Like all these
Oh yeah.
things they're doing that, it's pretty wild. Yeah, it's crazy when you start digging into it. It's just like what you start seeing
Well,
there. I
this is
wish
the
I knew
thing
more about
too.
the.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I wish I knew more about the Greek myths and stuff. Like I really only started to learn that stuff more recently. Like I actually went to Greece and we kind of stumbled on the Temple of Delphi, and
Oh
that
wow.
was like what really triggered my interest. That's what really triggered my interest in the Greek. I was just like so fascinating. Gaia was the original venerated god at the Temple of Delphi, and that's why the what do they call them? The Pythons, I forget what they call them, but they were the women because
Yep.
it's the women that had to speak to the earth, I guess, right?
You
So
brought
that
this up.
didn't
You brought
change.
this up in your video on Asherah, but like we can see this clearly in the literature. You were 100% correct. Like you can see how in the earliest documented text, she's called the Delphine Drakon. Sure, her name is Delphine and she's the Drakon. And the Drakon literally means the one who sees in the earliest, okay? When you break it down, it has nothing to do with monsters. It has everything to do with perceiving the future and having the magic to shape reality, okay? To cause timelessness, to stop time, to paralyze people. This is what they're claiming that they can do. And all of this gets twisted. And we can see like this clear patriarchal shift. So eventually, Delphine becomes
Yeah,
Python, a masculine character who gets slain by
yeah.
Apollo,
Because
right? And Apollo
Apollo,
takes over,
that's it.
right? But even in the
Yeah,
earliest myths,
that's
right?
right.
The
And it
first,
was right around the
yeah,
same time. Yeah.
go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say it's right around the same time that the patriarchy was taking over in other parts of the world too. It was all kind of
Yep,
happening at the same time, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
You brought up that
It's
resonance
interesting,
theory,
eh?
which is something that is very interesting too, right? Because this kind of attack on the feminine seems to happen as a wide sweeping cultural event, you know? It doesn't happen
A
overnight,
shift,
but
yeah. Yep.
you know, and it seems to
No.
coincide with agriculture.
Yeah. Well, we like when we moving into cities, I think, and stuff. Like so when we were living in villages and even cultures even today that live that way, like the women run the village, right? It's still like
Right.
that, right? And it's
Absolutely.
even that way in most households. Like it's even that way in my household. Like my runs the kitchen, she makes sure, you know what I mean? So like the women
Absolutely.
really do still, it's more the natural way of being. And it wasn't until we like accumulated wealth and built cities and lived in cities and got away from nature, separated ourselves from nature. But it's sad, and for me, that's what I believe in now. That's what I believe in is nature. Like, and it's I mean, she's alive for sure. Mother Nature
I
is alive
couldn't
for
I
sure.
couldn't
You
agree
can,
more, right? Like animism is the foundational root of my belief as well, right? And this is something that is just this is why I have such an issue with Christianity because it rejects the earth and it tries to stop time and it wants to break the cycles of death and rebirth. It wants to end history and create some kind of fantasy utopia. But if we are nature worshipers and we love
yeah,
nature, you could never have a utopia in nature. It's antithetical to nature. Nature needs to change and needs to grow and expand. As soon as you isolate things in an changing hierarchy, that's hell. That's a nightmare. That's anti nature in every sense.
yeah, yeah. But we're so disconnected though, like many of us from the world. Many of us haven't even seen really what nature even looks like. They've only ever lived in this box or whatever and played video games or watched TV and never experienced nature, like which is it's kind of it's like yeah. So you don't know what you're missing until you like connect, right? But I was born
Right.
like in the country, so I was lucky that way, I guess, right? Because I mean, I go to the city and I'm just like, oh, I call it the big shitty. That's what I call it.
Right,
You know,
right, right. Well,
it's
the
like
city is so chaotic. and it's concrete and artificial. You can't see the stars, you can't see the sky, you know, you can't do any you got no natural wildlife. Everything is anything that does survive is like forced to be there. It wouldn't be there naturally, right? It's all messed up. But this makes me think, I was reading this, I love short fiction, and there's this really amazing story I read. Have you ever heard of the writer Algernon Blackwood?
No, I don't think
He
so.
was
The
a
name
he was
kind of
a
sounds
horror
familiar, but
yeah, he was a British horror fiction writer from like the early 1900s, but he wrote this
okay.
amazing story called Initiation. And it blew my mind reading it the other day because it's all about going into these pristine parts of nature and in engaging the divine. And when you can witness that divine element of nature, all of a sudden the rest of that artificial world stops mattering, you know, and you come into this empowered purpose and you feel connected to life and you understand things. And we have lost this. We have lost this connection. You know, I keep thinking about this idea, like I was talking to my friend Leslie about this, you know, we can rape and destroy the mother earth and no one bats an eye, but then something like, you know, and like what was that church in France that burned down, the Notre Dame. The Notre Dame burns
Uh,
down and the world
Notre
cries.
Dame.
We raise $1 trillion to rebuild
Right.
it, and it's like, that's fake, that's nothing real, that's a human created piece of art, you know. Meanwhile, the thing that provides us with life and gives us everything, we're ignoring and dumping shit all over. You know, like, I don't know.
Yeah. I know, it's insanity. It's insanity, really. Like,
It's
and that's why I
insanity.
say we should go back to worshiping. We should go back to worshiping Mother Earth. Change a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Like, if we did, I don't think we'd be dropping bombs on each other and cutting her forests down, and we'd be taking care
Right.
of her, right? That's as
And
it
you know,
should be. The
right.
lesson of the of Eden is. It's like that's my
Oh yeah, no, you're right. You're right. You
sorry.
know, I like to look at a lot of those stories in the Bible, like especially the Garden of Eden. You flip it on its head, apply the antiphrasis, and all of a sudden it starts to be a pretty good myth. You know, we want to we want to empower
Yeah,
ourselves in knowledge. We want to come into nature. You know, I don't know. It's just so it's so ridiculous. Like, you know, for me, one of the big rewarding things and why I got into pagan practice, I read this book called The Life of Numa. And it's a mythological tale about the mythic second king of Rome. And this is the guy who's responsible for all of Roman religion, according to the myths. But how does he how does he get in touch with the goddess, and how does he create the Roman religion? This is what really struck me. He takes a vow of silence. He takes a vow of not being greedy. So he's only going to eat what his ancestors eat. He says he's going to eat the grain and drink water and eat meat. And he's going to go out into the woods and sit by the river. And he's going to listen to the river. And he does this for 4 years. And eventually, the spirit of the river, the goddess Egeria, reveals herself to him and teaches him the true nature of life and gives him the foundational law for Rome. And that to me, like, when you look at a lot of these ancient myths, when you're really connecting to that spirit of nature, you got to go into nature. You got to sit in the silence with the self and see how we're connected and be inspired by that. You know, the in the most ancient religions, far predating the Bible, you know, like in Sanskrit, all of that is inspired by the magic of the birds. Right? It's these stuff was heard, it was witnessed within nature, you know?
yeah, yeah, and
I'm
we can't
getting
even. So it's all covered up with concrete now, right? We can't barely see it because it's all covered up with concrete, right? Which,
yeah,
but I mean, you can make the choice. I've made the choice not to live in the concrete jungle. I go to work there, but I don't live there, and you
right.
know. But I highly recommend it. I highly recommend unplugging from the world once in a while and just going and enjoying nature. It's just like what keeps me sane for sure in this
We
crazy
all have
world.
to do it. We all have to do it, man. You know, and I think that's a big thing because, like, I think a lot of this stuff. honestly, it's just too much contemplation and overthinking. You know, so much about religion and so much about all of that is born out of this um obsession and narcissism with purpose and everything, rather than accepting the world you're in and trying to make sense of what you're facing, you know. And I think a lot of it
Yeah,
also
I
comes
think
from just a lack of community too, and a lack, you know, again, when we're going back to talking about these indigenous communities who won't join Christianity, you know, I was reading this one guy who was talking about these people in the depths of the Amazon jungle in Peru, and these people didn't even have a word for worry. They didn't have a concept of mental illness. If someone got sick or injured, the tribe just took care of them. The people on average worked 15 hours a week, and they had no desire to change their way of life. They were completely in tune with nature, and they were just, you know, they were happy to do their thing. And everything about Christianity just seemed absolutely absurd. And they were okay with the nature of the life that they were afforded. They were happy to experience it, you know?
yeah, well, they're still living in the Garden of Eden, right?
Right.
There's,
That's such
what
a
do they
good
need
point.
Jesus for? What do they
What do
need
they need
Jesus
Jesus
for?
for?
They're
Oh
already
man, that's
living
such
in the
a good
Garden of
point.
Eden.
That's such a good point. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're already living in the Garden of Eden.
They
So,
didn't live it. They didn't leave it. Because that's what I think changed is like once the ability to accumulate wealth became a thing, that's when the world changed, I think. And like I was talking about before about how writing was literally invented to track wealth. That was what it was invented for. And then we shortly after that we started writing stories, right?
mhm.
And and tried to because I think Gilgamesh was fairly how you say patriotic or it was a patriarchal system to Gilgamesh,
Oh
right? I
yeah.
don't know. Have you read
Oh
it
yeah.
or?
I've read bits and pieces. I haven't read it in like the original, but I've done a bit of Gilgamesh. I more so know the version that's told in the Greek, Deucalion, but it's the same story, you know?
Yeah.
You get these similar flood myths all across that region.
Yeah.
Because flooding of the Mediterranean was just a reality of
Happened.
life. But the
Yep.
difference in the Greek and the Sumerian versions is like many people survive, many mountain peaks. The whole world doesn't flood. It's the Mediterranean that floods, you know, or it's
Yeah.
their world, right?
It's their world. Yeah. Their whole world. Their whole known. So to them, it's the whole world. Yeah.
Exactly.
For sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, all of
Yeah.
this has
It's
gotten.
fascinating stuff though when you
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying it's fascinating stuff when you start digging into the archaeology and you start looking at the evidence we have and stuff and start, like, because there is some history there in the Bible. Like, it's not all just made up. There's some history, but some of it is written retroactively to make it look like it's a prediction when it's not. Like Daniel, they say is like written 500, and same with like even or Mark, like it had to have been written after the temple was tore down because that's why they always date it to 70 because that's when the temple was. So it probably wasn't a prediction. It was a comment on what was happening, right?
Right, right, right. It's just like what we see, you know, a lot of people get screwed up with what apocalyptic literature is. You know, apocalyptic literature isn't necessarily about predicting the future. It's about calling people to account in the moment. You know, like he was talking about his political present and he was having a mystical vision on drugs, you know? And it when I read Revelation, to me, it's just so Greek. It's so
Oh
mystical Greek.
yeah,
Like
it's
there's
like a
very
Sibylline,
little
isn't it? Like a
Christianity.
Sibylline oracle or something?
Oh,
I've
it's
heard.
very
Yeah,
similar. You can see
very
actually their
sim.
direct lines lifted from what survives of the Sibylline Oracle. The Christians
Oh
destroyed
wow.
most, you know.
Yeah. Hmm.
But
Yeah. So
where it
there you
gets
go.
really wild too, like you know, like a lot of this stuff from Revelation are pre-existing philosophical ideas, you know, that have to do
Yeah.
with specific magic. Like I noticed that you had an episode. You're talking about the mark of the beast 666. So what do you know the mark of the beast is from the Christian tradition? And then I'll contrast it with the Greek.
What do I know it is? Well, from the Christian tradition, it's like the Antichrist, I guess, right?
Right,
And
right.
that's the one that is going to like I don't know. It depends on what Christian church you're talking about too, because
But,
like there's
what's your
this.
perspective though in general
Well,
on the triple six?
my perspective was, well, like, I don't know. It always used to be the mark of the beast, right? And
Hmm.
and and then it was like for me, okay, so myself, when I read the Bible, I found it interesting that King Solomon received 666 talents of gold,
Mm,
which is like, so, Revelations isn't the only, and the Bible does that. It'll comment on itself a lot, right? So
right.
then my thought was, when like commenting on the 666, to me it meant wealth, gold. That's what it meant to me, right? So in my video, I don't know if you watched the one where I kind of tied it to that patent that Bill Gates has. That's
Yeah,
weirdly, it's patent 60606, and it's a
which is weird.
cryptocurrency. So it's weird.
It is
Could
weird.
he
There are
could have
there
been
are
on
some weird
purpose?
magic
Just
going on. Sorry, we got
yeah.
froze really badly
So
there.
he could have
What were you
done it on
trying to say?
purpose just because he. Oh, I said Bill Gates could have even done that on purpose just because he knew it would, like, people would be going, well, that's weird, or who knows, right? Like but
Right.
anyway,
Six.
so yeah, like I know that though they say that actually Nero is supposed to be the beast, and like Revelations is actually talking about Nero. It was like again a comment on something that had happened. But the thing about history is it tends to repeat itself, right? So
Yeah.
see these figures rise, periodically, like a Napoleon or a Hitler or whatever. They're an antichrist type of figure that, similar to Nero, you see it over and over again in history, right? Which is again interesting, right? So,
Oh, absolutely.
are we going to find it within? And they seem to get worse with every incarnation. So things go in the world around, and it's like it's scary. It's scary stuff.
It,
But they're
it's
even
scary stuff
using
for
like the
sure.
dispensationalists. Well, they even use what bothers me is they're even able to do these things and to justify these things they're doing. It's insane. Like that's not
It's
what I thought it meant
absolutely
to be a Christian. It's wild, but sad.
it's it's so insane to me. You like when I look at the triple six. I mean, it could be related to Nero, but I honestly think that it's missing the forest for the trees. Again, if you go and you look at Pythagoreanism and you look at isopsephy, which is the Greek version of number magic, it's the same thing as Jewish gematria, right? What is the triple six in isopsephy? It is the Trinity times six. So within the classical Greek conception, a lot of people don't think the Trinity is Christian. The Trinity originates in the Orphic. It originates in the Orphic. There's this Trinity of Arekpeos, Phanes, and Metis, which represents this cosmic egg that is the embodiment of all form that then is ripped apart and becomes the descent of matter. Okay. And within the Orphic tradition, there's this understanding that humanity, like in the Indian and the Buddhist, humanity is this perfected middle place where we can come into enlightenment and exit out of reality and achieve a form of ionic life, they call it. It means timelessness. So the Orphic is this kind of mystical tradition, more related to the Eastern and the Indian philosophies than to what we see in the modern West. And when we look at the
Like
Orphic,
I,
go ahead.
I would say in reality, the with the Trinity, it's barely even biblical, really. Like it really isn't really mentioned in the Bible. That's not even really hardly in the Bible. Maybe in John a little bit, and that's it. So
Right.
this the Trinity for sure was something taken from something else. I for sure was, because like I said, it's not even really biblical. It's not.
No,
It's
it's
crazy,
not
right?
biblical at all, right?
Yeah,
It comes out of this Orphic tradition, where in the Orphic
yeah.
tradition you have this idea of zero equals two, or the triple three, and then in the Orphic tradition you have this idea of the perfected middle path, right? Which they represent as the six. And so there's this understanding that the Son is the triple six. It is the Trinity brought into our reality, brought into the middle world. And so you get this trinity appearing in our world, which would be the you know, what we get in the classic Christian, which is the Mother, the Father, and the Holy Spirit. But this would be in the classic Orphic, this would be Hecate, Apollo, and Diana, or Artemis, you know? So there's this whole kind of wild thing going on. And the idea in the Orphic is that, again, we want this child to come. We want the rebirth of Dionysus. We want the sun to come back. So you need to bring the sun into the perfected middle path. You need to take him into that 666 so that he can achieve enlightenment. So the 666 is this idea of the child to come again, the rebirth of this God, you know, which is
So the
essential
cycles
to all
again.
these. And it's all about these Bacchic cults. And they're running around the Mediterranean. They're in Israel. They're in Palestine. You know, so like we know Jesus is influenced by these people. How much is debatable, but there's just no
Or
doubt.
whoever wrote the
Yes,
Bible.
yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
Because
Right,
like
right. We don't know if he was even a
yeah,
person, but yeah.
yeah, we don't even know. And if whoever wrote it might not have even met the guy, right? He could have been
Right.
just a
All
like
hearsay.
totally a political. They heard about him and then they used that to base their story and like, yeah, we just don't know, right? But I think it
We
was for
don't
sure
know.
politically motivated. I think
Oh, that's
that's pretty
guaranteed.
clear for sure. Yeah,
But
I
you
was
know,
gonna say, can
go
I
ahead.
tell you an interesting thing I seen in nature, which I found weird
Yes.
about we're
Yes.
talking about 666. So Saturn is the sixth planet from the sun, right?
Right.
Saturn has a hexagon shaped storm on its north pole, which a hexagon is a six sided shape, so 6 6, right? And then they say that there was another six. What was the other one? Oh, what was the other one? There was like, but it's like, and then I also found it interesting because Alman always says that Saturn is actually the Greek name for Satan, actually,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
right? So,
So Saturn and Satan are etymologically connected, but Saturn is also Dionysus because we're talking about the sun. And Kronos, Saturn, represents one aspect of the sun. So much of the Greek myth needs to be unpacked through these kind of metaphors of the stars and understanding the play of nature. And what Kronos represents, he represents the sun right before it dies at the solstice, right? So this is the old man, the tyrant, who refuses to give up the crown. He wants to stop time. He eats his children. He's been corrupted. He needs to die and be reborn as Dionysus. When you slay Kronos and he goes into the underworld, now you've brought the sun into the earth. And now he can be reborn as the fresh shoots of spring, the child to come. And this is what we see in the Saturnalia. Saturn dies at the end of the Saturnalia and is reborn as Dionysus on the 25th.
yeah.
You know?
And see, and that's very, very similar to the ball cycle too. It's
Yep,
very,
exactly.
very similar. So,
They're all talking to each other and
yeah,
they're
they're
all
all
playing off
yeah,
the
for
same
sure.
roots. You
Like
know?
it's can't. How can you say which one came first or whatever? It's like which came first, the chicken or the egg? They're all talking to each other. They're all trading with one another. They're,
Oh
reading
yeah.
or writing.
I only go to the Greek because they got a great literature and we
Oh
have a
yeah, it
lot
has
of it
a
saved,
huge.
right? But
Yeah,
it's clearly not like I'm not one of these people who are going to say like this is the magic perfected ideal, you know? We're all pulling at
yeah,
straws trying to reconstruct
yeah,
history. But
for
we
sure.
got
Yeah,
more
like
history in the Greek than anywhere else, right?
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think the Persians have a lot of history too, though.
They do.
But
They
it's
do.
it's something we don't really study in our Western world,
No.
right? Like, and so they say they like had calculus before we did, like is what I've read, and very, but but it was the Persians that the Greeks were fighting too, right? So like we've never
Yep.
forgiven them, I guess. In the Western world,
No.
we're still
And it gets really weird too in the Greek world, okay? So the most powerful witch, the most powerful magician, the savior in the Greek tradition, the soteria, is the goddess Medea, right? And the goddess Medea is the granddaughter of the sun. So we're getting back into the solar stuff with Kronos, Dionysus. But the thing with Medea that's so interesting is she, in the text, is the synthesis of East and West. She represents the coming together of the ancient African, because she is said to be the consummation of the Libyan magical tradition. And then she comes into the Mede magical tradition, which is the Aryan magical tradition. So in her story, she comes from Libya and then she goes to Persia, right? Where she becomes the queen of the Medes. So the Aryans changed their name in the Greek to the Medes as a worship of her. And so there's this, and then the Magi take their name from her, according to the Greeks. So they see it as this synthesis of those two cultures. When East meets West, that's when the salvation magic is possible. That's when everything starts to make sense, you know?
Right on. Yeah. Wow.
So I thought that was always interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Man, you're a wealth of knowledge, that's for sure.
You
So,
know,
so,
go ahead,
so
sir.
you took religious studies in university, is that what you
Yeah.
took?
So I did a double major in religion and anthropology, and then I did a partial master's, it's called. So I only did 2 years, but in philosophy. It was like a
Yeah.
combined thing. So I got to go to India and spend time in Pune, about 6 months. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
so
That's cool. Yeah.
and then on top of that, I'm just a super nerd. This is what I do.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Right on. I wish I had more time. Like I'm a Bible nerd. I call myself a Bible
Right.
nerd, right? And but then I have other interests too. Like I used to make whiskey at one time, so
Oh, that's amazing.
so that's but pretty much like I went to school for electronics. That's what I went to school for. So not anything related to but I just I think as I grew up, like
Hmm.
going to church like from since I was like I can't even remember, right? And it was like I was deconstructing myself, I suppose, is what I was doing. Like I really did a deep dive, and then and then I was like interested in AI, so I'm like, oh, let's see what this stuff can do. So then I just started making videos, and and it's just been a lot of fun doing it, right? And I've met some pretty cool people along the way, like yourself, and all the people at the Lady Babylon, or the people at Soma Library, sorry. It's like amazing people. So I got a question for you. So
Sure.
what do you think is that draws musicians to Ammon? What is it about? Because everyone I meet is a musician, which is really
Right,
cool.
right. Well, the muse,
Yeah,
right?
the
How do you
muse.
connect? So if you're going to connect, so the muse tradition, okay, how do we unpack this? The muses are the goddesses of inspiration, but it's more complicated than that. There's this idea within the Western magical tradition of the holy guardian angel or the daimon. Are you familiar with this?
Uh, I've heard Almond talk about the daimon. Yeah, a little
Yeah, well,
bit. Like,
the daimon gets really complicated because it takes on in the Greek multiple ideas. So I'm going to focus on this idea of like the holy guardian angel, which we get from Crowley and from Alpheus Levi. But it's this idea that each of us, we're actually two. So within the ancient Greek philosophy, they talk about this. You have a story where Prometheus actually made humanity as bigendered, and then Zeus split us in half because he didn't want us to have the power, right? And that fire is actually the feminine magic that's been given back to us. And it gets all complicated, but there's this idea within the magical tradition that we are trying to connect to our other self. So we have two aspects, the body and then the highest self. And the whole magical tradition is you want to go through this process of divine imitation, where you are connecting to your highest self and you're trying to follow what they call your true will. And so you come into this kind of connection where you're living your best life. And the idea is if you're living your true will, you're kind of in this Dionysian or Taoist mode where you're moving through nature at peace, harming none, and living a beautiful life, right? So the muses connect to this in the ancient Greek. The daimon, the holy guardian angel, is the muse. So there's this understanding that each of us in the Greek magical tradition, you have to connect to your highest self. You have to unite the earth and the air and bring them together, the masculine and the feminine, bring them together, re-heal yourself, know thyself. And so through this process, you come into empowerment, into knowledge, and into true self. Well, how do you connect to the muse? You do it either through the experience of nature or through music, especially drums and especially string guitar, right?
Dreams,
These
yeah.
are where you get into the wild magic in the Greek. The drums, we can see this in every shamanic tradition. If you do certain pulses and you engage in a focused reception of that pulse, you will enter into an ecstatic state if you have the right kind of mental state and you practice enough. You know, what the where the guitar comes in, where the magic of the guitar is now you're creating melody within rhythm. You are telling your story. What is the point of a magician? A magician tells their story. In order to experience reality, you have to call it into being. By harmonizing within a rhythm and creating your own melody, you're effectively telling your own story. You're communicating and being inspired by the muse, and you're engaging in this transformative process of self realization and contemplation. The Greeks saw song as intrinsically important. You could not achieve enlightenment, nor could you see the future without music, without the heartbeat, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. The
And it also
muse, you
gets into
connect
this
to the
stuff,
muse
right?
through music. You connect to the muse
Exactly.
through music. Yeah.
To
Yeah. And
me, like,
because
you're a
he must be
musician.
onto something because
Oh
he
yeah,
really attracts the musicians, right? Like that's what.
right. But you're a musician, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So the best way to describe connecting to the muse from a musical standpoint is like, you ever get into those points where you are completely lost consciousness and you're just playing, you're
Yeah.
just or improvising, you're just
Yeah.
engaged.
Like, yep.
Go ahead.
Music is very spiritual. Like, there's no doubt
Right,
about it. Like, yeah.
right. So there's this thing though where it's like, I am not doing the music, I am possessed.
Yeah, no,
Now,
I know what you mean. No, I do. I do. Like where it's just flowing, right? Like it's just flowing,
exactly.
and those notes are just coming out of your fingers without you really effortlessly. Just the muse is, yeah. And I always thought of it as being in the spirit, is what I always thought of it.
Exactly.
Like same kind of idea though. But
It's
yeah,
this, man, I grew up in a Christian
mm,
church too. It's the same exact thing. Those people in the
yeah,
spirit calling down, enjoying the music, no different from the guy in the at a punk show jumping
yeah,
around and also
for
experiencing the
sure.
spirit. That's all the
Yeah,
muse in my mind, right?
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. But I always just thought that was cool because like literally everybody I meet is like, oh, you're also a musician. That's so cool. So.
Right, right.
So
And
it's
there's
like
something. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, so not only is it like he's kind of created a community too, right? Like that's this community of artists and musicians and just like which is a very cool thing, I think.
Oh, that's what I'm all about. That's why I've stuck around all this time. I mean, I've stuck around because Ammon does great stuff and he's entertaining. But it's the community more than anything in that artistic flair that I find truly rewarding. Because that's what to me is the whole point of all of this is like, okay, so you break free of that Christian propaganda. So you break free of the religious propaganda. Now you're confronted, we have to return to nature and we have to figure out a way to know the self. Well, you know the self through art, through music, right? And we connect to nature in the same kind of way. If we go back to these ancient traditions, there is a more, these people were more intimately connected to nature than we are because we've become so dependent upon technology and cities,
Yeah,
you know, and we
for
can
sure.
learn from them. I mean, you don't need to go to those books. You can just go sit in nature. But,
Yeah.
sometimes people need to be told to go sit in nature. And a book
Yeah,
could be
well
that.
you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Right, right, right. So for the
But
big thing for me
I
is
would
just empowering people. Like what really inspired me about Ammon was this idea of the muse and that you could
yeah,
connect to your highest self and find purpose and that you could create something beautiful, manifest art, you know?
yeah. I think for me it was like he's a compelling, right? And
Oh yeah.
he has a very compelling story to tell, and I can see some of the things he's saying like, let's call it a root cause analysis, if you know what I mean, with the
Right.
church. Why is it so messed up? And well, it's interesting anyway. But like when he said, because like I had what you would call a cognitive dissonance when I first heard what he
Mm,
had to say. And then he's like, well, you don't believe me? Here, I'll teach you how to read Greek. I'm like,
right.
well, cool. That's cool, right? Like, so then I'm like, then like that's when he did that Amen you thing. So that's when I started doing that and started learning the Greek. I was already learning Spanish though, so it's hard to, it's hard to do
Oh, of
everything.
course.
But it
Man, it's
doesn't
always
hurt
so
either.
hard. It's
It
so
doesn't
hard to
hurt either
learn
though,
something.
because
Yeah,
there's concepts that it reinforces within Spanish too, right? So yeah,
absolutely. And there's
he
something
said,
about learning a language that it reshapes your mind. It
yeah.
helps you to reperceive. You know, I mean, you're Canadian, you'll understand this too. So, I grew up in a bilingual family, and the French thing was such a big deal in my family. It's like you cannot lose your way of life. You cannot lose the perspective of our ancestors. If you don't speak French, you won't see the world as your father did, as your great, all of that gets. And I mean, part of that is made up and ridiculous, but also part of that is just true. Your language shapes how you perceive reality, and this is
Yeah.
so important. It defines a culture, it defines a perspective. So when you learn the Greek, you're literally going back into an ancient perspective and seeing the world in a different light. Now, that's not necessarily better than our current one, but it's an alternative that
Oh,
you can balance and you can
so
contrast.
tell me what you think of this. I actually read
Mm.
that learning a language in your elderly years can help you avoid Alzheimer's.
I mean, that makes perfect sense to me.
So,
You
and
have to
it's
exercise your mental muscle, right?
yeah, yeah, there you go. Yeah. So that's a good, because I was when I was in Costa Rica, and one of the reasons I went there is because I wanted to practice my Spanish, right? And I
Hmm.
was talking to a fellow that was right around my age, maybe a little older, and he's just like, well, what's the point in learning a language at this age? And then I told him that, well, actually, it can avoid Alzheimer's. And he's like, oh, well, okay. Like there is some scientific proof, I guess, that, or you know,
Right.
some evidence that supports the idea anyway. But yeah.
Well, there's a ton of it gets complicated, right? Like part of the issue with like, or not, the hard part about what Ammon is doing is, number one, we exist within a Christian reality, that has denigrated that pagan perspective, and that pagan perspective has largely been marginalized or lost. What does survive is known by an academic elite, and that's a dwindling academic elite. I don't One of the things that I find just beyond wild is looking at our current, I took religion studies as part of humanities, so I have a degree in humanities, but like my wife wanted to go back to school, and she tried to apply to take language courses. She wanted to take Greek and Latin in humanities. And the university she applied to told her that they canceled their humanities program because it was just not worth it to maintain anymore. People
Or
aren't
like
going to this. No one,
nobody
yeah.
was taking it. Yeah.
Well, it's part of it is no one is taking it because there's very few jobs in it. But the big
Yeah.
thing is that these universities are literally attacking it because of billionaire wealth and because of people like Elon Musk. Like it's literally getting really ridiculous. Okay, like I read Texas A&M University got rid of their Greek program because Plato is woke. We just talked about Plato.
Because Plato was woke.
Plato doesn't like women. Plato is a pederast. Plato is a globalist. Plato is a Greek elitist. How is that man anything to do with woke? And he's from thousands of years ago. Like, what are you talking about? It makes absolutely no sense. But this is the
Yeah.
stuff they feed to the ignorant masses. They tell you that Plato is a problem. The reason why they don't want you to read Plato is because if you study philosophy, like when I was in my master's program, I went to India and I met it. I didn't really get into Western philosophy until I went to India. And my teachers rebuked me. They're like, why didn't you bother to, like, you didn't learn this in the West? And I'm like, no. Well, we're going to have to teach it to you here. And the first thing my professor said, he goes, Snappy, don't worry about what you think about Plato. You have to read Plato. And I said, why? Because everything in the West is a commentary on Plato. If you don't know Plato, you don't know Western philosophy. You can't, you know, this guy was a cornerstone that everyone's critiquing, you know, and he has some good ideas. Most of them are 1,000 years outdated, but he's this foundational character. And if we don't study
Some,
him, we don't know where we've come from. We'll make the same
yeah,
mistake.
he's the foundation. Yeah, he's the foundation of Western philosophy, essentially. Yeah. But some of
Exactly.
his ideas are timeless, like I said,
Oh
about
yeah.
the idea of the only ones that shield wield power are those that don't seek it
Oh
or
yeah.
whatever.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that's
He wouldn't
timeless
survive the test of
because
time if he didn't have great ideas. You know.
because humanity doesn't really change, right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
Einstein said when they invented nuclear weapons that this changes everything except for how humanity thinks,
It's
which
such a
is
good
kind of
point.
it's kind of a scary thought too, isn't it? Like because now we have really serious weapons do serious damage, and we still think like we haven't evolved in our thinking really in thousands of
No,
years. It's
no, we haven't involved in our thinking. Look, right now we're engaged in a war in the Middle East that's largely being framed through Christian Armageddon language, at least to a specific audience. If you want that narrative, they'll feed you that narrative and sell it to you,
oh yeah,
you know?
big time,
And it's so
big time.
wild.
And I know people who buy into it, and it's like it's sad, like like how
It's beyond sad. It's beyond, but they also do so much to indoctrinate you. Like I had a beautiful, like
yeah
one of my aunts, right? She's very, very Christian. She's such a beautiful lady, but her church took her to Israel and she went and served Jewish people and they went and did this whole big thing where it was literally an indoctrination party to indoctrinate her into supporting the state of Israel, to equating the modern state of Israel with Christianity and with the coming of Christ. And she came back and was telling me all this insane nonsense. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like,
yeah
but this is the reality, you know? It's this political
it's
game.
it's like they're trying to pull off some kind of crazy self-fulfilled prophecy or something.
Well, this
It's
is what I wonder, you know,
it's like
you know.
why though? Like
So I'm coming out of this, even these ancient texts, from a magical perspective. You know, I'm really deep into the magic. So I look at something like the Bible, and to me, is this a magic spell designed to create a future? Is this literally a work meant to manifest something? Like we're talking about, if you look at the Bible and the way it's written and the way it's constructed, it led to the destruction of Amalek. Whether or not the destruction of Amalek happened, we're now witnessing the genocide of Amalek, and the people themselves are saying it's thus. So this book has manifested a reality. It created a real history. Whether or not that original genocide was true, this one is,
yeah
right? And
yeah
how
yeah,
wild is that?
and that's the rhetoric they're using to like justify it, like
Absolutely. So these
and
things create
people
reality, you know?
yeah 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 it certainly has. Well, like it's also have you heard of the Scofield Reference Bible? Have you heard of that?
No, what's this?
So the Scofield Reference Bible is like what the foundation of dispensationalism is, and
Mm,
uh, and this is where this idea of the rapture comes from. Actually, is not again not really biblical. This idea of the rapture is not really biblical. Like it kind of comes from this reference Bible. It makes references in the margins and like helps you interpret the story in that way, right? And
right.
it came out in 1917, which is the same year they gifted the land, the Balfour Declaration. If you've heard of that,
Right. Yeah.
same year, 1917.
Man,
So it's crazy. It's
it's crazy.
crazy.
And you know, I look at the Puritans and I look at that crazy Protestantism. It's an extension of British Empire. And the British Empire never died. It just transitioned to America. And it's still
Yeah,
the same
oh,
thing.
100%.
It's still the same thing. It's still this Puritan evangelical Christian streak that wants to empower empire. And it's empowering this kingdom idea, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's how we know we haven't evolved because we're still falling for it.
We're
Like,
still
you
falling
know,
for it. We're still
well, not
falling for it.
everybody, not
No,
you and me, but I mean,
no. But we
enough,
still have
enough.
Crusader kings. Pete
Yeah.
Hegseth is a literal Crusader king. He has Deus Vult tattooed on his chest. Like that man
Is what?
is a war criminal. Deus Vult, which was the
What's? Oh, Deus Both. Who's that?
so this was a cry of the original. So for the first crusade, this was the cry that they uttered to announce the crusade. So this was
Oh,
something you
okay.
would shout before you killed the infidel. Deus Vult.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember
I,
exactly what it means. Um,
huh.
is it means God wills it. God wills it.
That's
And
Is that Latin or
it's Latin, yeah. And so this
Deus
was the
Vult?
Roman Church
Hmm.
going and doing their crusade against the Arabs. And it's like
Yeah.
all about
Holy
murdering the
war. Yeah.
innocent, you know?
Yeah. Holy war. Yeah. That's what we have on our hands right now. Is a holy war.
It's a holy
It's
war. And it's
and
ridiculous
I like.
because go ahead.
I say like it's kind of absurd that we're arguing over whose imaginary sky daddy is the best one when it's actually all the same one. It's because
Right?
ironically they're all Abrahamic religions. So
Right?
like
Right? But you
it's
know, they are
crazy.
it's the narcissism, it's always the narcissism of small difference. You know, I look at Christianity and it's Greek, to me, it looks exactly like Greek paganism. I look at Islam,
Sure.
it looks
Yeah.
exactly like Greek. So it's all Greek paganism to me. Islam, Christianity, Judaism. It's just pick your tribal affiliation and
Yeah.
pick your interpretation, you know, but it's all the
Well,
same
even
nonsense.
in Ireland, it was the Catholics and the Protestants. They're even both
Yeah.
Christian, and
Yeah,
they're killing
right,
each
right,
other over.
right.
Well, you
I
don't
mean,
quite believe what I believe,
right.
so
I mean,
therefore,
it's always been like this. It's always been like since Constantine, right? When Constantine created the Catholic Church, what did he then do? Declare all the other people null and void. One of
yeah,
the first things they
yeah.
did was they went and they tried to exterminate the Donatists, right? The Donatists were people like, you know, the big deal back then was trying to figure out how was God a man? Was God divine? You know, creating that Holy Trinity thing. And the Donatists they became the modern Coptic church in many ways. And these are people who believe that God is both man and divine. But the Catholics, the original Catholics by Constantine, tried to genocide these people to a man, you know,
Oh wow.
right? When we
Yeah,
see this happen numerous times, the
yeah.
Cathars, they almost wiped them completely out, you know? And who knows how many sects they did wipe out? All these various Gnostic groups that no longer exist, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I thought we had evolved. I,
Right?
I guess I was wrong. Man, was I ever wrong. Really thought we'd evolved past that, but
One of the wildest things too is if you get into some of these ancient Greek texts, you know, Ammon showed me this one text one time. Blew my mind. Okay. So this is a legal text talking about the stuff the Christians used to do. They used to ban so they had to put gates. The Romans had these catacombs and they put all these gates on the catacombs because and they you even would put gates in cages over the sarcophagi because the Christians keep breaking in to the sarcophaguses into these catacombs and they were hotboxing them and they would drink the corpse liquor. This is what they
oh
say. They would
wow.
drink the corpse liquor. They would open up take body parts in order to do black magic. This was
Oh
the
wow.
accusation, and they were engaging in
Yeah.
these wild sex cult rituals. Now,
Hmm.
this also sounds like what the Bacchic cults were doing. And in my mind, Jesus comes out of these Bacchic cults. So I don't think this is Roman satire. I think they were drinking the corpse liquor.
Mm. Oh,
You know?
could be. Yeah. I mean, and that's what I was saying earlier about how, like, what early Christianity looks like. When you start looking, it looks completely different than what you think it was or whatever, right? And
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's wild. Yeah. And it's
You get
like,
all this wild stuff. You get the Sethians, the Valentinians, you know, you get some people who are talking about you know, some of these Gnostic, and this survives up until modern occultism. So there's some sects of the Gnostics that believed that the communion was the sperm of Christ, and they were called the spermatophagy, which means the seed eaters. And they believed that you drank the seed from the original Christ and it was passed down in this divine lineage. And you would drink the seed of the next divine master in a successive lineage. So you were always eating the blood and the seed of the Christ. And if you go into the Greek, this is implied in the language. The blood is the seed, right? Thank you,
mhm.
Gandhi, for the correction. It's actually the Ophites who believe that. Sorry, but yeah. wild stuff. The
Yeah, wild
spermatophagi,
stuff. Yeah,
you know, and
yeah.
like to the point where even in the 1800s and the 1900s, occultists were reconstructing this Gnostic stuff and we're doing it. So Crowley engages in the spermatophagy to try and have some kind of magical experience, and he's like, "Yeah,
Oh
it's
wow.
nonsense," you
Yeah.
know. But these people are all crazy, you know.
Yeah. Oh, it was like a different world though. Like I mean,
It's
yeah,
the
I
same
mean it's
world, but different world. You know,
yeah.
one of the things I look
Yeah.
at is like we still have sex cults. We've always had them. We still have
Yeah.
drug cults. We've always had them. It's just they're off in the fringes and people don't
Yeah.
pay
No,
attention, you know?
nothing new under the sun.
No,
And that could have been in the fringes too back then as well, right? Like it probably
absolutely.
was, right? It wasn't the majority of people doing these things. It was
There's this really
yeah.
awesome text you got to check out. It's called it's by Lucian and it's about it's called the false prophet. And it talks about this guy Alexander. Um who Alexander of Abono um, Tychus. Yeah. So this guy was a wild character. So he actually the accusation from Lucian, and this seems to be documented within the Roman law as well, is that this guy was a fake prophet who made a giant sock puppet of a snake. So he had a giant snake sock puppet, and he would have mirrors and smoke, and you would come and you would ask for a prophecy, and it would reveal you a prophecy. And this guy Alexander was going to overthrow Rome. He actually was empowering all these people, and people were believing him until they were able to prove that it was a fake sock puppet, and he gets crucified by the Romans. But like this kind of
Wow.
cult shit was happening all the
Yeah.
time,
All over the place.
right?
Yeah.
Right? And it
Yeah.
was even documented, you know? And
Hmm.
like, I mean, Lucian is he's comparable to the founding of Christianity because he's writing around 100 AD or so, 200 AD between then.
Yeah.
And like, so
He's Greek, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it's Greek. Yeah.
Greco-Syrian. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely heard of him. Yeah.
You know,
I
he
can
actually
call him.
writes. So what's interesting about him is he's before Christianity really takes off, but he's clearly aware of the Christianity because he writes
Oh
a
yeah.
satire. Well, there's debate. So the question is Lucian directly satirizing the Christian, or is he satirizing an earlier tradition? We don't know. But he's making fun of the story of Jonah, and he makes fun of the Christ in this book he has called A True Story, which is widely regarded as the first science fiction story ever made. It's a really,
Okay.
really crazy
Oh,
book.
that's cool.
In this story, what happens is these guys try to sail off the edge of the ocean, off the edge of the earth, and they wind up taking off into space, and they wind up making it to the moon. And when they get to the moon, they find these aliens on the moon who are all men, and they give birth from the thigh only. And they all wind up engaging in this massive warfare. And when they get killed, they explode. But
Wow.
the part where it comes into Jonah. So what ends up happening is after they have this massive epic war in space, they take their ship and they bring it back down to Earth. They land in the ocean, but they get swallowed up by a giant whale. And when they go
Okay.
inside the whale, they find an not
There's
they find
Jonah.
an entire civilization. There's a
Oh
whole
wow.
city living inside the whale, and they have to do stuff to blow the whale up and get the fuck out. But it's a wild story. And when you read it, you're left wondering, did he know? Did he know the Bible? Is he talking about the Bible? Is he satirizing? He's the Old Testament and the New Testament because there's some direct allusions, but it's wild
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. You know that story sounds very familiar. I feel like it's been made into a movie or something like that. Like,
So there is a movie that kind of references it. Have you ever seen the movie Eric the Viking?
is that what it is? Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
might be
So
the one
that's
I'm
done
thinking
by
of.
the Monty Python guys,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's a Norse story, but it's the same kind of concept where they sail off the edge of the earth, you know.
Yeah. Into outer space and fight aliens. That's the
Well, they don't fight
early
aliens in that one. They
science.
go to the
No.
gods. They
Yeah,
wind
yeah.
up going to the gods in that one, but it's wild stuff.
Yeah, it's a while ago when I seen that one. That's a while ago, but yeah, that
It's a great
story.
movie.
That's pretty cool. Anyway, how long did you want to go for? I probably should
We can
get
wind down
going
here. Yeah, for
fairly
sure.
soon. My
What I want can I ask you one final question? Is there
yeah.
any kind of wild story or thing from the Bible that you think people need to be exposed to, that you think is really out there and crazy, that you would like to
Well,
end this on?
hmm. Well, that's an interesting question because, like, I will tell you the story that woke me up when I
Mm,
read the Bible myself is Judges 11, which is the story of Jephthah, who he goes to war against the Ammonites, I think, and
right.
he pledges to God that if he gives them into his hands in victory, he will burn as a holocaust the first thing that walks through the door when he gets home. And guess who walks through the door when he gets home? It's his virgin daughter that walks through the door, right? And so now
Wow.
the Christian apologists will try to like do some mental gymnastics to try and convince themselves that it doesn't mean what it does mean. But like it's pretty clear what it means, I think. Like, and
Mm,
it's like, wow, like then when you start reading and you start thinking about the Abraham and the Isaac story and how every firstborn male is consecrated to God and all, there's a lot of it's like, wow, the root of this religion really isn't so good at all. Like, and
no,
it's right there, right there in the foundation story, right? Like,
right.
Abraham's going to offer Isaac up as a Holocaust, right? Right in the foundation story. It's like, but they flip it on its head, right?
Well, this is
But
the thing.
but
But that also comes from the Greek, though.
yeah,
What's
but there's
wild to me.
also
Mm.
there's also evidence that the Canaanites were doing that, like
Oh
the
yeah,
firstborn. Like there's archaeological evidence in Crete, I think, or and they're like God, they're related to the Greeks too, because they're all like
absolutely.
you say
They're all
intermingling.
in the
Like the same with
same people,
yeah.
largely.
Like they
Yeah.
say, like the purple, like the Phoenicians are gonna get the credit for the purple, but they think it was actually the Greeks that did it first, and then the Philistines. Some people believe the Philistines were actually Greek. They were like misplaced Greeks
Yep.
because you can tell by their pottery. They like have Minoan style pottery. So like they were teaching each other things probably, right? So
Absolutely.
and then they're
There's a big theory that says that the modern Palestinians were actually forced out Cretans. They were after the collapse of the original
yeah,
Mycenaean civilization, the Greeks forced the Cretans out. Well, where did the Cretans wind up? You
yeah,
know?
and they'll bond, yeah,
You
like on
know,
the coast of yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah,
So there's some
there's
wild.
some, yeah, I've read there's some DNA evidence and some archaeological evidence to support it too. Like this, but yeah, it's interesting. Anyway, so I don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of like that's not a very whimsical story to end on, but like that's the thing that really woke me up to like, you know, but then I like, first I thought, like I said, when you read the Bible, like, and you read about Sodom and Gomorrah and everything, and there's some terrible stuff in there. And then I used to think, oh, like, thank goodness we have evolved, you know, like, thank goodness we don't act like that anymore. But yet here we are today, and there's still people carrying on like that. And it'd be nice to.
Absolutely.
It's like we need to, yeah, we need to evolve. We need to move on from this. We've been hypnotized for 2,000 years. It's time to wake up, I think, in my opinion. But
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've all been binding ourselves to this cult, abusing our children, indoctrinating ourselves into ignorance. For what? For what? You know?
so to keep certain people in power, I mean, it seems to
Right.
be what the
But
purpose.
I have a very similar experience to you. You read Judges and you saw the virgin sacrifice, and that is shocking. For me, it was um two things. It was the condemnation of Eve in the Old Testament. Like, it opens up with the degradation of women, blaming women for everything. I can't reconcile this. It doesn't make any sense. And then the other big thing is the death of the firstborn children of the Egyptians. What did the
Yeah,
innocent children have to do? So you're telling me you genocided an entire generation for the sins of their parents, innocent babies? And this is justice? This is the perfected God's justice? No, that's evil. That's freaking evil, and I'm going to call it out. And this is, I think,
yeah.
such an important thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Seeing
Oh,
that
and then
negativity and calling it for what it is.
yeah, like I mean, I can see where the Gnostics got their idea for the demiurge, that the Old Testament God was not an it was an evil God, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, when you read the Old Testament, it's pretty. He's not a nice guy because it's
No,
yeah,
he's
in
not a
the
nice guy at all. And that demiurgos, it comes to us from the Greek. And this is this
yeah,
idea of the god Saturn as the tyrant. Part of the thing in the Greek is you have to slay the son so that he's reborn as the child. If that old man stays on the throne too long, he'll consume his children. He'll stop time and lead everything into degradation. We need new life, new cycles. The worst person is the one who commits patricide, like kills their children and prevents the next generation from growing. This is the ultimate evil in the ancient Greek tradition. And in my mind, I look at Yahweh. What does he want to do? He wants to stop time, create a Jesus hierarchy, Om Lambda, perfected world on earth. That's the most Saturnian, that's the most anti-nature thing imaginable.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I never thought of it that way until you point that out. But you're right. Yeah, it's like stopping the natural cycle. It's going to end, and then it's going to be utopia, which is like, yeah, it's just not even a possible thing. Like that doesn't align with nature.
No, it
And
doesn't align with
yeah,
nature at all. Yet we keep falling for this myth of utopia again and again and again. It's like, for me, the myth of utopia was really destroyed when I read the book series Dune. But like, I don't know why we keep falling for these things, you
I
know?
think it's because people want to believe it. You
Yeah,
know, it's just like when I was a kid, I believed in
that's
Santa
a good
Claus
point.
because I wanted to believe in Santa Claus because it's a very nice thing to believe in, right? Like it's a comforting idea.
Yeah,
So, and then people, if you like sort of draw into question their beliefs, they'll like experience a cognitive dissonance and get quite mad at you for, you know, nobody likes to be woken up, I think
that's such a good point. Waking
they're
up
not
is
gonna
hard. It sucks.
they're not gonna thank you for it. It's like
No.
no, they're not gonna be happy with you. But
Yeah,
anyway, but
well,
I
yeah,
should
this was
get going
awesome.
though.
This was
Yeah,
awesome.
it's
Thank
great.
you so much, my friend. Really
Oh,
appreciate you
thank
coming
you.
on. And
Yeah, it was a great talk, man.
is there anything you want to promote or talk about before we say goodbye?
No, not really. I mean, I have my YouTube channel, which is, but I'm like not really heavily promoting it. It's just something I do.
Mhm.
But if people are interested, go over and have a look. And
Yeah, check him out.
I
Stone
love to
Bible
hear
Study.
people's comments. I love to hear people's thoughts. It's like I used AI. I get a little criticism for me using AI, but it's like it was a way you can produce something like pretty good for a pretty cheap price that like it brings it to the level of a regular guy that you can produce some pretty cool stuff. And
Yeah,
mostly I played a lot of the music too. Some of the videos, like it's just me on an acoustic guitar basically, just to try and avoid any kind of copyright is mostly why I did it. And then yeah, so no, that's about it. Yeah, I really
yeah.
appreciate.
I love this, man. You're give yourself more credit. I think you're doing really good research. I really like your channel. It may be AI, but you reference the scholars and you have wit about you. It's fun. And I don't know the AI voice you got, but it's pretty damn good.
Well, it's my voice cloned, but I kind of like put a little bit of an act on when I was making it, so to try to make me sound like some Southern Baptist church priest or something. I don't know.
I
That's what
love it.
the
It's
idea
great.
was. Oh, thanks, man. Well, I appreciate that, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
All right, my friend. Well, thank you so much. And let's stay in touch and maybe we can do this again
Yeah,
sometime.
for sure. Love to.
All right.
Yeah.
Much love, my
Take care.
friend. Take care. All
Much
right.
love.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone. Please support Blitz and Stone Bible Study. All right. Have a good night, everyone.